WG to his friends and adversaries was a giant. In an era when England actually used to win things, Dr. Grace had a grip on cricket for 40 years. Batsman and bowler, they say that in no sport has anyone ever enjoyed such unquestioned supremacy, and he was born in July 1848 in Downend exactly 150 years ago. When you stop to think about it, W.G. Grace is arguably one of the most famous people to come out of Bristol. But look who we choose to commemorate. Which king was he? We've got a fingerless statue of Queen Victoria. John Cabot was an Italian, and Brunel came from Portsmouth. Colston was a slave trader, and who's heard of him outside of Bristol? I suppose the real issue here is who's worth commemorating in Bristol, and who isn't. So now that the old boy is 150, I think it's about time we recognise his achievements and put him on a pedestal too. The only question is, where? There aren't many people alive these days who can remember watching England's greatest cricketer. But Mrs. Primrose Worthington can actually claim to have played with him.
I can remember him in the garden. There was a little patch of grass down by the vegetable garden where he used to bowl to us, I imagine, because we learned to play cricket. I played cricket at school with a bat that he'd given me.
As the last surviving grandchild of WG, Mrs. Worthington is now in her 90s. She's living in a nursing home near Portsmouth.
I remember him as an old man pottering about in the garden, and that's when, you know, he used to come out and play games with us.
He had a very stern reputation as a cricketer, quite a fearsome character.
I don't think that's correct that he was fearsome. I think that he was just strong-minded. I think they were a bit frightened of him because he was such a big man.
Yes.
But he was marvellous with children. When we were very young, my sister and I sat each on one knee, and he was a very big man, probably we were only about 5 or 6, and plaited his beard. You know, it showed he was very good with children and not a bit fierce. I mean, we weren't a bit afraid of him. When you're only a child of 10, if you have a grandfather, you wouldn't probably know he was important, would you? Just be a grandfather at that age.
It is true that if you know where to look, there are all sorts of little reminders of WG scattered around Downend. From a plaque on his birthplace to the sign over the local shopping centre. If you're looking for something a bit more imposing, then I suppose this has to be the logical place. There are all sorts of stories from this ground, like the time WG declared at 93, so ensuring he'd made every score from 0 to 100.
Yes, this is the museum.
The best of the memorabilia that Bristol can muster is normally kept here in the Club Museum. A small collection of souvenirs from pub tables bearing that distinctive face to bats that made centuries.
There's a bat here. Now, this was given by W.G. Grace to a vicar friend of his.
But with the birthday looming, the most prized mementos have all gone up to Lord's. You can't see them in Bristol because they're on show in London.
I would have loved to have seen him, yeah, sure I would have done. And obviously with the runs he did score, 50-odd thousand runs in his career, first class that is, over 100,000 in all in, he must have been a useful player.
There are many stories connected with him.
Well, of course, the old story, as you know, gets added on at the time, but the story that was generally he was playing in a sort of benefit match or exhibition match, as you might say, and the umpire gave him out, and he said, "You can put your finger down," he said, "because they come to see me, not to see you raise your finger."
So he wasn't a saint. But the truth is, if there'd been no W.G. Grace, there'd have been no county ground, and the story of cricket in Gloucestershire would have been completely different.
Well, the main legacy, I think, is this pavilion. Although it was refurbished 8 or 9 years ago, the basic structure of it is still the same. The back wall and the front wall are as designed by WG over 100 years ago, and until it was refurbished, it was very much as it was when he laid it out.
Right. Do you feel we should be doing more as a city?
I think so. I think people recognise WG as being probably the forerunner of modern-day cricket, and certainly perhaps the largest name ever to embrace the game. And I think other than the Grace Gates here at the county ground and the Grace Gates at Lord's, he's been very much forgotten as a major figure of the last century and early part of this century.
WG's birthday is not passing off completely unnoticed. A small exhibition has just opened at the City Museum. Ironically, it's opposite a tableau of Bristol's famous sons and daughters. Look closely and you may just spot WG.
We've got quite a range here. From left to right, we've got Mary Carpenter, who was a great 19th century social reformer. She's talking to Edward Colston, which should have found difficult, rather, because he died 200 years earlier. The little lad at the front there is the boy poet Chatterton. We've got Canning there with a model of St Mary Redcliffe, but there's quite a few people there who aren't immediately recognisable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So W.G. Grace, where's he?
Well, he's there, isn't he? Can you see him at the back there?
Where do you feel he measures up?
Well, in terms of measuring up, I mean, he was a big man. I mean, he was 6'2", 18 stone, and wore size 16 shoes, which were likened to canoes, apparently, by some of his contemporaries. And I think that had the scale of this painting been correct in terms of physical size, he'd have actually loomed rather larger than some of his neighbours. But in terms of his importance in Bristol, I think there is some ambiguity which remains today, which is perhaps why his place in the city isn't quite as well recognised as it might have been, as it might be. For example, he was born in Downend, outside the city boundaries, and the role of sport in achieving the fame of a city, because that's what this painting is about, hasn't always been fully recognised.
At least in Downend, they've given Dr. Grace pride of place. It's not far from here where he played as a boy, and a plaque in the village church remembers his contribution to the game of bowls. In the shadow of the church, the local cricket club are proud of their association with the great man, even if he never actually turned out for them.
I think I'm right in saying he only played here once. You see, he was 45 years old when the club was formed. So I think I'm right in saying he brought a side here, a Gloucestershire side, to play against Downend. And on that occasion, it's well known that the local postmaster bowled him for 3. The people of Downend are very much aware of their privilege in having him born here. The place is surrounded by W.G. Grace memories. Most of his family are buried in the churchyard here. This is the Grace Memorial Ground. Grace means everything to us here.
Round here, there's no question of anybody forgetting W.G.'s birthday. On July the 19th, the cricket club will be celebrating in the best way possible, with a game against Gloucestershire, and a small party that weekend too. It would be nice to think that the ghost of England's greatest cricketer will be watching from the boundary.